Dr. Ade Tinubu, how does fatty food affect our body?
Fatty food affects the body in different ways.
Okay.
Fat itself is not inherently bad.
Okay.
Like everything, you have to do it in moderation. But there are three different types of fat.
Okay.
The saturated fat, those are the type of fat that at room temperature, when you put them down, they become solid.
Okay.
Like meat fat,
Okay.
palm oil, coconut oil, and stuff like that. When you leave them at room temperature, they will solidify. Those are bad.
Oh, okay.
The polyunsaturated fat and the monosaturated ones at room temperature will be liquid,
Okay.
like soy, oil, vegetable oils, and stuff like that. Those are generally the good ones.
Okay, so they're healthy.
Those are more healthy
Okay.
than.
Okay.
So one of the things you want to avoid is get away from coconut oil, cooking with palm oil, and stuff like that.
Okay.
Cholesterol itself is a key thing.
Okay.
Two different types, what they call the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. The bad cholesterol tends to be higher in those type of saturated fats.
Okay.
So the more of them you take, the higher cholesterol is going to be.
Okay.
And over time, when your cholesterol gets high, they start depositing. It's like putting a cup down, and you start putting salt in it. After some time, the salt, the water will become so saturated that the salt will not dissolve. It will start settling down at the bottom of the cup. Same thing with cholesterol. It will start depositing on the walls of the blood vessels,
Okay.
decreasing the ability of the blood to flow. When it starts getting on the blood vessels of the heart, you have coronary heart disease, where the blood supply to the heart is not as good.
Okay.
So that is why you want to limit the type of fat that you take in.
So, Dr. Adebola, how deadly are these diseases?
From what you have said, deadly, anything that can kill is definitely deadly. And usually when we say a patient has had a heart attack in medical parlance or medical language, simply means that the blood supply to the heart has suddenly been cut off because of what Dr. Ade Tinubu has mentioned. Because over time, this saturated fat that is laden, that has a high content of bad cholesterol, especially the LDL cholesterol, is deposited in the lumen of the artery that supply the heart muscle. And with times, calcium is also added, and it becomes hardened. And with increased deposition, the lumen continues to narrow. We say it is stenosed. Until one day is all of a sudden, usually there's a trigger. It could be stress, it could be a suddenly elevated or very high blood pressure, cigarette smoking. This thing that is deposited, which we call a plaque, suddenly there is a ruptures. And when it ruptures, just like any injury to the body makes attempts at healing that rupture. And it does that by producing a blood clot to seal off the rupture.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this is an artery that is already narrowed. So this blood clot can only seal it off by occupying the remaining space that the blood was trying to pass through. And then there is a complete occlusion of that artery and a complete cutoff of blood to the heart muscle supplied by that artery. And that is the classical heart attacks.
Wow.
And if it's an emergency, as we all know, if nothing is done, the patient's life is measured in minutes or seconds, depending on the nature of the artery that is blocked. So it is definitely a deadly disease. And that is why the emphasis is on prevention. Because even if you are in the best of place in the world with all the facilities, it costs money to take care of these patients. A lot of things goes into it in terms of the medical cost. And in any case, even if when when they are treated, it's not like they return back to, I mean, how do I put it? It's not as if the heart condition will completely go back to normal. So that is why the emphasis is prevention, to avoid all the risk factors, which some we have highlighted, especially high cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes, especially uncontrolled diabetes, obesity, inactivity, lack of exercise, and more importantly, cigarette smoking.
I was going to go to that question.
Etc., etc. Because if you can prevent this accumulation of and all these vicious changes right from the onset, then nobody will talk about heart attacks and the cost.
Before you round up, Sir, Dr. Adebola, I would like you to shed more light on how bad habits, I don't even want to call it bad habits really, habits like drinking and smoking, how really does it affect the heart?
Yeah, that is also a very important question, because one of the things we tend to emphasize is lifestyle changes or modification when we pick people who are at risk, either primarily, in which case we say primary prevention, or secondary prevention, in which case the person has already developed the disease, but you don't want it to progress further, or you don't want the person to have a repeat attack, because some people can survive a heart attack and have another episode.
Wow.
And in terms of lifestyle changes, I mean, the drama we have watched emphasized on diet. And when we talk of diet is not so much about just quantity, but the type of food that you take. And we've emphasized the fact that you want to avoid high cholesterol containing diet, polyunsaturated, saturated fat diets like palm oil. We are against excessive intake of palm oil, not because it contains cholesterol, because cholesterol is mainly from animals, but because it contains saturated fat.
Wow.
Red meat, organ meat, these are the ones that really contains high cholesterol.
Wow.
So you want to cut them to the barest minimum. Now, we're not saying that you should abstain from them completely, because the truth of the matter is they also have some other constituent that is useful to the body, like iron and all that. But the emphasis is on moderation. And when it comes to cigarette smoking, there's nothing like moderate cigarette smoking. In fact, even passive smokers are at risk, not just of heart disease, but even so many other things. We don't want to go into that. And it has been well proven. There was a landmark study, we call it the Framingham Heart Study, that was done in the US, conclusively proven that smoking is a dangerous and a very risky habit in terms of mortality from heart disease, not just from heart attacks, just name all the acquired heart disease, hypertension, etc. So smoking is a no-go area. That's why we even advise that even passive smoking should be avoided. As for alcohol, initially in the past, we felt that alcohol too was contributory. But over the years, what we have discovered is that there is a kind of U-shaped relationship, or some also call it J-shaped relationship, to alcohol drinking and heart disease, whether it is heart attacks or whatever. And the science behind it is that it was found that for moderate alcohol intake, and when we say moderate, depends on the gender, meaning that a man should not take more than 3 units of, we measure it in units, and a unit is 8 grams of alcohol. So if I say 3 units, that is 8 times 3, 24 grams. A man should not take more than 25 grams of alcohol per day or on any occasion. And a woman should not take more than 2 units, which is 16 grams on any occasions. Anything above that is excessive. If it is moderate, we discover that it tends to increase the level of what Dr. Tinubu refers to as good cholesterol. That is the HDL cholesterol. And that is the initial part of the U in terms of mortality. So the mortality and morbidity with heart disease drops when they are moderate. But over time, it reaches a nadir, and then it starts to climb if they continue to take higher amount of alcohol. Because what happens is that HDL is produced in the liver. When you now take a larger amount and quantity of alcohol, it destroys the liver. So the liver cannot even produce the HDL. And that is when excess alcohol intake, binge drinking, is dangerous to the heart.
So I would like to ask Dr. Tinubu, we are talking about alcohol right now. I hear people say, oh, red wine is good for the heart. People say that a lot. Oh, red wine is good for the heart. So they take it a lot. How good is red wine?
Well, like Dr. Adebola was saying, alcohol itself is not bad.
Okay.
It's not taken excessively.
Okay.
Red wine especially has been proven to have a beneficiary effect on the heart.
Okay.
Especially when it's taken in moderation.
Oh, okay.
You know,
okay, there's a clause there.
A glass
okay.
of red wine, maybe with your meal.
Okay.
But once it starts becoming excessive,
oh, okay.
you have the injury to the liver, as described by Dr. Adebola.
Adebola, yeah, okay.
So when somebody says, because they say red wine is good for the heart, I'm going to sit down and drink a whole bottle of red wine, then they're putting themselves at risk.
The issue of red wine too has to do with the HDL we're talking about.
Okay.
It was finally noted to actually improve the HDL. And one of the reasons why this was noted was because you know that red wine is produced majorly in the south of France. So they noted that the incidence of heart attacks, coronary artery disease is much more lower compared to the northern part. And that's why they were able to link it up to red wine.
Red wine, okay.
I must also add a word of caution. When we say moderate alcohol, it is for those who have normal heart. When the heart is already diseased, there's nothing like moderate alcohol. You don't
so
protect.
they should abstain from it?
Yes, you can't protect against what is already bad.
Okay.
So any other additional alcohol will further damage the heart. So moderate alcohol intake is only advised in those who have fit heart. It's important to emphasize that. When the heart is already diseased, there's nothing like moderate
just completely
alcohol intake.
abstain from it. A round of applause for our doctors. Wow. I'm sure we have one or two people with questions. Anybody, please signify. Okay, let's have a question, sir.
My name is Sholaru Adewumi from Government Senior College, Eric Moore Road, Surulere, Lagos. My question is, among the lifestyle changes that can lead to the problems of the heart, we were talking about diet the other time. I want to believe is stress also among it. And if stress, then what is this stress and how can it lead to problems of the heart? Another question is, we're talking about vegetable oil and palm oil. Which one is better? And what effect? Because like myself, I prefer vegetable oil than palm oil. I mean, I prefer palm oil than vegetable oil. But I'm hearing something against the vegetable oil now. So I want to be enlightened. Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Okay.
Okay, all right. The issue about stress is always a difficult thing to address. Part of the problem has to do with how do we even measure stress?
Okay.
Because what is stressful to Mr. A may not be stressful to Mr. B. And secondly, it's difficult to design an equipment that can say, okay, this is the level of stress in Mr. A, this is the level of stress in Mr. B. That's part of the problem why we find it difficult to give an objective scientific answer as to the relationship between stress, for example, and heart disease, the various types of heart disease, blood pressure, heart attacks, etc., etc. But what we do know, mainly from observation, is that stress is one of the things that can trigger heart attacks in an individual who already has the risk to heart attacks. And when we talk of stress, it can come in various ways.
Okay.
It can be stress in terms of physical activity, in terms of being overworked, for example, or mental, psychosocial stress. There is no doubt that it can contribute to the incidence and the onset of heart attacks and high blood pressure. Now, as to whether stress on its own can sustain, for example, high blood pressure, it's difficult to say. Because just as we all know, stress is dynamic. Just as I said again, Mr. A that is stressed now, in the next 20 minutes or an hour, may become calm if whatever has triggered the stress is off. So it's not as if stress is a continuous thing, and that's one of the reasons why it's difficult. But what we tend to emphasize is that stress can trigger heart attacks, can raise the blood pressure suddenly in people who are already at risk.
But doctor, I would like to, how will you know that you are stressed?
Yeah,
what are the signs?
That's part of what I was saying, that it's only the individual that can answer that.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for our doctors. That was well answered. I've learned so much from this particular question. Another question in house?
My name is
Okay. Can I have a question?
My name is Anu Akilanwo, a student of Government Senior College, Erikmon, Lagos. Sir, please, what is the cause of hole in the heart?
Wow. Dr. Debola, I'm sure you want to dive into that question.
Well, just as it is labeled, a hole in the heart, in the real sense of it, is actually a hole in the heart. Because the way God has built the human heart, the blood in the left side of the heart should not mix with the blood in the right side of the heart.
Okay.
The heart is divided into chambers. You have the left chambers and you have the right chambers.
Okay.
And even each of the left and right chambers are also divided into an upper segment and a lower segment. And there is a complete division from up down. So this is the basis of that is that blood in the left side, in the right side of the heart takes blood from the whole body, from the system. We call it venous return. And takes this blood, which does not have oxygen, because the oxygen will have been extracted by the body for energy, and take this blood back to the lungs for oxygenation.
Wow. Okay.
And from the lungs, the blood now goes into the left side of the heart, so that the left side of the heart can pump the blood to the system for oxygenation, and the whole cycle is repeated. And as a result of that, nature now recognizes the fact that these two bloods should not mix. That is why the left and the right side of the heart is completely separated. But you have situations where, I think Dr. Tinubu mentioned earlier on, that you have congenital heart disease, especially when babies are being formed in the womb. For whatever reasons, we shouldn't go into that. I don't think is the purpose of this. Some babies don't have complete division of the left side of the heart from the right side. And there is a communication. That is why we call it a hole. A communication between the left and the right. We call it, what divides these two chambers is referred to as the septum. So there is a communication in the septum that now connects the left chamber with the right chamber, and therefore blood in the left mixes with the right. That is what we call hole in the heart. Now, if it occurs at the upper portion, we call it atrial septal defect. Because atrial septal defect, because the upper segment of both the left and right is formed by the atrium. We have the left atrium and the right atrium. So when the communication is between them, we call it atrial septal defect. When it occurs in the lower segment, which is the ventricular segment, that is the one that actually pumps blood, we call it a ventricular septal defect. So this is what we classically refer to as hole in the heart. It's just that a lot of people, because they cannot identify the exact medical terminology, A lot of children who have a heart condition, they all say they have hole in the heart. But most time, it's not all of them. Some have other problem, maybe valve problem. Because I think I should also enlighten us on that. Because you also have a situation where we have what we call valves in the heart. And these valves are both in the left side and in the right side. And the valves act like gates. You know, when you want to enter any building, just like this building, you must pass through the gate.
The gate, yeah.
Excellent. So, for the left side of the heart to pump blood into the system, the valves in the left must open and close at the right time. So, when there is a problem with that valve, it can also cause problem. That can also occur, but that is not hole in the heart.
Okay.
So, you discover that there are some people who have valve problem, but they still call it hole in the heart, but that is not hole in the heart. That one is valve problem.
Okay, thank you so much. A round of applause for our guest. Wow, we have Dr. Tinubu take his final word before he leaves. Thank you so much, Dr. Tinubu. We've learned so much from you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, your final word.
On the question of the hole in the heart,
Okay.
I think I will go back to that. And it's simply that most of the time you discover it in children. But if the size is small, you may not discover it until the person becomes an adult. And over time, it gets bigger and they start having symptoms from it. But with everything else, the critical thing with the heart is to make sure you take care of your heart. It's only one. You cannot easily replace it.
Place it.
Although they do heart transplants today, but in Nigeria it's not available. Even in places where it's available, it's still a very, very expensive thing. And once you lose the original one, whatever it is that is given to you cannot last as long as the one that God has designed there for you. So it's only one, and if it's not there, the person cannot be alive. So it's very important to make sure we take care of it.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Dr. Tinubu. Thank you so much, sir.
The heart is a very, very powerful organ of the body. I've never had heart problems before. The only heart issues I had before many years ago was when I was heartbroken. Yeah, and it was, you know, a beautiful lady that I thought I loved. I never knew she didn't love me, and I was so heartbroken because, you know, we're with our phones and she was having a bath and, you know, her phone rang beside me and I picked up the phone for her. I never knew that ladies, they store guys' name on their phone using different gadgets, you know, and she stored somebody's name on her phone and the name was low battery.